My name is Adam Sachs. I'm the Executive Director of Biodiversity for Livable Climate. Livable Climate, yes. And we're a small nonprofit that promotes restoring ecosystems to address global warming.
Nice, thanks.
Including regenerative agriculture.
Yeah. And Wayne?
Yeah, hi. I'm at an outdoor conference, as Alex said, which doesn't sound like it would be related, but it is, because lots of people here that care about the planet. And so I'm meeting with a number of different clients and others. It's just a convenient place. So I'm with the Institute of Ecolonomics. So that's not an easy word to say, but it's the combination of ecology and economy. And our simple goal is to help people make some money making the planet better. So we work with entrepreneurs that are developing either new businesses or growing businesses, and try to help them with funding, with research, with marketing, all kinds of things. We've been around a little while, since 1990 or so, and we were founded by an actor, Dennis Weaver, who is no longer with us, died about 8 or 9 years ago. And we are this is, I guess, the fourth or fifth of these that we've done together with Alex. And please, everybody, but just know that this interaction is really important for all of us, for you, and you can get a lot out of it. So thanks for letting me be on, Alex.
Nice, thanks, Wayne.
So,
go ahead, Adam.
When we met at one of these a few weeks ago, and the conversation was about science, and you're a much more experienced scientist than I am, having been a professional scientist, and yet you've come to very similar conclusions that I have come to. I've had graduate level science courses, but I don't practice, and I'm mostly an activist. I'm entirely a climate and eco-restoration activist now through the nonprofit. So through different paths, we've come to similar conclusions, and I'm very interested in your take on the problem that we started to discuss, that is, we have an almost faith-based belief in science. And people do things like run, oh, this is a peer-reviewed article. If it isn't peer-reviewed, I don't believe it. They run that up the flag, and everybody salutes, and yet the whole concept is full of holes. And we rarely talk about the holes. And yet, in the regenerative land management movement, we are constantly asked for the science, which of course doesn't exist. There is no such thing as the science. There's lots of pieces and lots of ways of putting it together, but there's no definitive the science. So how do we deal with this? I guess it's two questions. One is, how do we communicate that science as practiced in academia, which is generally what is referred to as the science, is only a part of the picture? And having communicated it, how do we move beyond relying on analytical and reductionist practice? And this is not a criticism of it, it just has a place. And when it takes over the whole picture, it gets really distorted, like climate and emissions reductions. That's the only part of the picture that is talked about in the mainstream. So with respect to science, how do we get to a better public understanding and a more productive inclusion of more empirical and quote-unquote anecdotal data, which is as valuable or more so, in my opinion, than the numbers that come out of the crunching. So that's the short way of saying it. So
are you Adam, are you asking Alex and I to comment, or the group?
Yeah, absolutely.
How would you like?
Yeah,
Alex?
I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Wayne, I think last time on one of our previous video chats, you had some really interesting thoughts about that as a practitioner, as someone who's been in the field of science for some time now. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I'm very new to this movement, and I'm here to listen and learn.
Sure. Well, I do have probably some feelings on that. First place, I have lived in that world. I started out my career as an academic. I was a college professor for 8 years, tenured at a liberal arts college called Augustana back in the Midwest of the US. But before that, I was at a large research institution, Scripps Institute of Oceanography and University of California system. So I've sort of seen all sides of it. I think I have over a couple hundred refereed journal peer-reviewed articles. I haven't written one in at least 20 years, Adam. Because I do share some of the same thoughts you just described, in that peer-reviewed science is taken to be too much the law or the rule, or however you want to describe that, by too many people. Quite honestly, for every single peer-reviewed article that any given author might write, they probably each have 10x of those that are never peer-reviewed. And it isn't because those 9 that weren't peer-reviewed are any way inferior to the one that was. It's just that they don't feel it's important to even submit them to any kind of peer review. But more importantly, my view, I think you're talking about, is that the best science, I would not agree, by the way, that the definition of science means something that's done by academics under peer review. The definition of science really is a process.
Right.
It's using the scientific method to analyze something and to affect an experimental approach to understand it, and then to put in practice some kind of an activity to lead towards some solution that you're trying to reach after you've begun to understand why it might be occurring. In my observation, the best science that has ever happened has occurred not by some belief that you create initially and then going through this analytical process to come up with a solution, but rather it's happened by believing that something can occur, so that you believe that you can let's use a big, start really big. You believe you can affect in a positive way a reduction in carbon emissions that would be creating climate change. So you believe that. And the approach that is more successful than the approach that most academics would take is you just start shooting darts at it. You just start doing things to reach that solution. And the way Thomas Edison invented the light bulb is he failed 9,900. That's what it said. He failed many, many, many times before he succeeded. He just kept doing things over and over and over again. And more of the innovations that have occurred in the world have occurred by that method than have ever occurred by an academic sitting and writing an article about it and dedicating his life to researching some particular topic. So, I think that we ought to be thinking more about incenting people and collaborating together. Alex and I had this discussion yesterday about collaboration. That's the other thing that has most often happened. And if you look at innovations that have occurred, they've come out of collaborative effort, not out of one person sitting in a laboratory or out in the field doing something that they want to write an article about. So let's start with that and then see if that generates what other thoughts. So.
Well, one comment about your Edison analogy is that he, in effect, had an endpoint, which was a bulb that turned on when you ran electricity to it. Now, obviously, there's been significant evolution in bulbs recently, but that was an endpoint. When we talk about the science of regeneration, I don't know that there is an endpoint, so that it becomes a much more of a systems process, where there are constantly emerging properties that none of the parts manifest. So we're constantly, and see, that's the issue that I have that's an issue that I have with academic science that goes off the rails a bit. It's the focus on the parts, and it's the little pieces, and the whole picture becomes built out of little pieces, and the systems aspect of it. Was that an evolutionary statement there? The banana?
Yes.
The systems aspect of it is lost. And that allows us to even think for a moment that we can equate global warming with carbon dioxide. And that's the kind of thinking that comes out of physicists and chemists of various stripes who've done great work with their particular studies, but relying on that kind of perspective to look at planetary dynamics, which is fundamentally a life systems-based dynamics. Without life on Earth, we wouldn't have an oxygen atmosphere, we wouldn't have we wouldn't have liquid water, we wouldn't have all kinds of things that have crafted the Earth into this living blue-green planet. Without life, it would have been a rock like Mars or Venus. So, if we exclude life as the fundamental dynamic in climate, lost everything. We've looked at the parts, but we've lost emergent properties.
Adam, can I challenge that as a
Sure.
scientist? Just for a second.
Yeah.
And by the way, my belief system isn't going to be the same as what I'm going to state here. So one of the things I guess I learned as a somebody teaching me science throughout my whole early life was a process, which was to always keep an open mind. So always be thinking, and don't, if you can avoid it, don't close your mind. So I hope that I will, as you get to know me, you'll see that that is what I think I am, fairly open-minded. So I'll play devil's advocate on what you said. If you were to believe in a Big Bang type of a theory and the belief that our whole universal system, as it might be defined, came from some chemical physical act that occurred billions and billions of years ago, you would actually not say what you do about why there's oxygen, why there's nitrogen. The fact is that that was what caused there to be able to be life. So you came from a whole different premise. You came from a spirituality presence, which, by the way, is what I come from personally. But if you come from a different direction, you'd say just the opposite occurred. Life occurred because there were the right conditions. You were saying that it was because of life that forms that we have those right conditions. The other argument is it's just the opposite of that. 180 degrees opposite of your argument.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that, because obviously if there weren't the right physical and chemical conditions, life never would have gotten started. But there's an interaction between life and its environment. So at first there are all these tiny microbes hiding in nooks and crannies from all the ultraviolet radiation and the violence of geophysical events. And little by little, they created their own habitats. Living things do that. Living things modify whatever environment they're living in, insofar as they are able, to be most favorable to themselves. Humans are obviously the prime example of that, but all living things do it. I mean, trees put out toxins to keep other things from taking what they want, and microbes and fungi, and there's all kinds of these relationships, some of which are symbiotic and some of which are toxic to one another. But living things are trying to make a space for their own needs. So I don't think what you're saying is different from what I'm saying. The physical world is something, and that something changes as life begins and as it evolves. And clearly, if a meteorite hits and the dinosaurs go away, then that's out of the control of the living system. But by and large, living systems continually strive to create favorable conditions for themselves.
So tell me this, do you think that human-induced climate change is natural? There's a lot of debate over what's natural and what should be, what kind of impact we should be having versus not having. So is that something that you would consider
Well,
natural?
I would ask you, are humans natural?
Yes.
Okay, so anything we do.
I agree. I'm with you on that, but there are some people
it's
that...
natural, right. So computer chips are natural. These are all our efforts at expanding carrying capacity and making our habitat, making our nest, and making our bed. And we happen to be an extraordinary species in that regard. I mean, there are others, beavers, is a popular one at the moment, but there are many species that make significant changes to the habitat. See, nature is completely neutral. Nature has no goals. It has no purpose. It just has process. So what comes up, what evolves, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And 99% of species, they say, are no longer in existence. Because
do you know the average lifespan of a species of our size?
Of our size?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't. I don't know I don't know what that means quite, because dinosaurs were much bigger, and you mean lifespan of an individual, or
of a mammal, for example? So I'm just wondering how long humans have been on Earth versus the average lifespan of our species, or of a species like ours. I mean, I know we're different than any other species, but do you know what I'm saying? I mean, how long have we been on the Earth versus?
That is a very, I think that would be, and Wayne, maybe you have something to say about that. That would be a very complicated question, because species lives in a habitat. If the habitat goes away, the species goes away. So with the dinosaurs, the meteorite changed everything, and over a couple of 100,000 years, they just could not adapt. And then there are other species that have been around for hundreds of millions of years, because they were adaptable enough, or the habitat was consistent enough that they could continue to survive. Humans have been around, depending upon where you put the starting point. Earlier humanoid species, 1 to 2 million years. Homo sapiens, 200,000 years. Others somewhere in between that. The Neanderthals made it till around 50,000 years ago. And that's what's behind the question, Alex.
I guess just looking at the current impact and the scale of the impact that we're having, I keep coming back to the question of what do we need to do in the time frame that we have to kind of save ourselves from catastrophic global warming, for example. Adam, you always ask the question of what would we do if we had 2 years to save the planet? What would we do?
It's 1.5 now since I asked the question.
So I would love to throw that question back at you. I mean, have you made any progress in the thoughts in that regard? And Wayne, what are your thoughts?
Why don't we give Wayne a chance here?
Well, let me say that there is a method that amongst scientists that there's pretty strong accord that we could do right now, that we could reverse climate change dramatically. Do you know what that is? It actually was, scientists came up with it by observing a physical event that occurred. Just to give you a little hint, the physical event occurred in 1984. So I'll tell you, there was a eruption of a volcano in the South Pacific in 1984 that was a little unusual compared to most, and that it emitted a sulfur dioxide cloud that very quickly didn't disperse laterally. It went vertical and went up into the atmosphere and above. And in less than 24 hours, global temperatures reduced more than 0.5 degrees centigrade. And that reduction continued, and the temperatures rose back up over about a 18-month period of time. So that 0.5 degree which occurred overnight, literally occurred. So then scientists started to look at it, what happened? So they started to observe what happened to that cloud of sulfur dioxide. What it did is it reversed the greenhouse effect. I'm trying to simplify this. There was a little more science to it than this, but it reduced impact during that very short period of time. So out of that, it was determined that we could take large transport planes and take sulfur dioxide up to the reach of their elevation that they could go, and then shoot those by missiles up into higher space, into that same atmospheric space, or above the atmosphere really, that cloud was at, and that we could, in a finite way, affect global temperatures in a predictable manner and bring them back down and then control them. And the cost is not a crazy number. It's probably several $1 billion that we would spend on let's say, a monthly basis to do this. It would take a huge amount of agreement amongst nations, and it would become a political issue more than anything. But it's pretty well accepted that that physical change that man could do is something that could be done. And now, is that all that is a Band-Aid? It's a Band-Aid. Literally, it does nothing to affect how carbon dioxide continues to get created. But there is a fix that can be done. Now, I would argue that political leaders know that can happen. Political leaders in the major countries of the world, they realize that, you know what, let these people whine or whatever they want. The oceans aren't really killing that many people yet as things happen. You know, the ice caps are, we're really not seeing any global economy affected. So we'll put that thing into effect when we really need it. We don't really need it right now. That's a cynic's view. It's my view, by the way. I think that's truly the view that politicians and global leaders have, which is that this just isn't the issue that all these crazies think that it is.
So, well, I assume you're not advocating for that.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that you ask about what we could do in a short period of time.
Oh, sure.
And there is a chemically, physically, all the aspects of what I described are completely doable. It's, like I said, it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's not only a Band-Aid, it's a potentially very dangerous Band-Aid.
Yeah.
No, there's not a lot of danger in it, quite honestly. That part's all.
Well, how do you know?
Determined. It's just.
How do you know that it?
What do you mean by the question?
How do you know that it's not dangerous?
They've looked at, because that sulfur dioxide was in the atmosphere previously. That's what's been reduced. That's why we've got essentially the ozone layer and such that's been reduced. It's because of that the sunlight, that we've got the radiation that's coming in. That's why the warming is occurring. So it's not. There's no danger from that. You're recreating artificially a condition that was there previously.
You said that this was a vertical cloud. No, the concentration.
It's a cloud in the atmosphere. It doesn't have anything to do with the concentration what we would be breathing. This is all up in what's called the troposphere. I can't remember exactly the elevation, but
well, just to shift the conversation a bit, I mean,
it would be a anyway.
Yeah, that's
go ahead,
interesting, and I'll check it out. But I certainly agree with you, even if there is no danger, which I still would question, but I haven't investigated it.
Yeah.
It's not getting to the root cause.
I guess that my question was also directed at what are the more like long-term holistic ways that we can solve the issues that we're seeing today, and how do we scale them up? It's always an issue of how we can scale them up and make these solutions available to everyone. I mean, you see solutions in Judith Schwartz's new book, Water in Plain Sight. There's people harvesting dew in the desert, and they're meeting all of their needs, their water needs, and meeting that of their neighbors. And so theoretically, everybody could implement solutions like this. Well, what's holding us back, and how can we?
Those are social issues. And those are political issues. Those aren't scientific or even land management practice issues. Because we know how to do the land management. There's always lots more to learn, but basically we know how to do it. And there are people doing it everywhere. So it's a matter of changing minds. Right on our tagline after our organizational name is restoring ecosystems to reverse global warming. And we use the term reverse global warming very intentionally. At that point, hardly anybody was saying it as a kind of challenge, because everybody's just talking about adaptation and mitigation. And if you don't start thinking about possibilities of actually reversing it in a fundamental way, you're not going to come up with anything. You're not going to see it. And so I've been looking at eco-restoration for about 7 or 8 years, and I would go into climate meetings and say, hey, we can pull carbon back into the ground, we can restore water cycles, and they would say, shut up, go away. And in the last year, there has been a fundamental change in what people are open to and the conversations that people will have. And we're going into peace groups and faith groups and food people who aren't directly involved in climate and saying, hey, this is a really important part of your message, even though it's a different message from our message. And we're working to get this message into groups that have never thought about it. And we say to the peace people, for example, conflict is primarily based on scarcity. When people are afraid they don't have enough food or water or anything else, they fight. And if you want there to be peace in communities, in regions across the world, we have to deal with scarcity. And there are many elements to it. There's certainly population pressures and density, but basically we have these billions of degraded acres that are not producing food, water, shelter, or not just, but ecological processes like moving water through the atmosphere and into rivers and all of that. And if we address that, then you can have your peace message and you put this in and add to the momentum of the restoration. So that's the way I'm starting to see the social piece and the political piece.
I definitely agree. I see it as a kind of a mindset problem, especially after reading Judy Schwartz's book. That's kind of top of mind because I'm writing an article about it, but really we do have these solutions available. And so it's all about making them more widely available. And it's a policy thing. It's a social problem. And Wayne, I know your organization is doing a lot to kind of bring solutions to other places. Maybe you could tell us a bit about your experience with that.
Yes, we are, and I it's on a very small level, but I believe pretty strongly, and it's based on observation, that Western culture, where we are, we've tried to help the world, hunger in particular, by violating the old Chinese proverb, which is that if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. We've taken the approach for many, many years of giving people fish. So we will impose upon people throughout the world where there's huge levels of hunger, malnutrition, other they should be doing to improve their situation. And our easiest measure is to just give them food and forget about teaching them how they can use the natural resources that they have, use their own intelligence, which is as good or better than ours, and they just don't know what to do. So that's the premise that our organization uses. And we go in and look at local areas, and first thing we do is we ask, what is it that you really believe you want or that you need? And they know. So let's just say it's food. Let's say it's hunger. We don't have a sustainable food supply. We have to get our food from a distance away. We just don't know, and we don't know how to grow it. We don't know what to do with what we have. So the approach that we take is that we go in there and say, observe, we suggest some solutions that would be locally appropriate. So we don't try to bring wheat in. If wheat's never grown in the area, we don't try to bring rice in an area where rice could grow. It would work, but it wouldn't fit into the local culture, and it wouldn't ecologically be balanced. So we look at, okay, what happened here historically? What was the historical balance between humans and the environment? And what can we do to simulate that? We probably can't duplicate it, but what can we do to simulate it? So we think about tools, solutions, and that's one thing that's a big point that I make. Too often as scientists, as I said it earlier, we are real proud of our tool. I'm proud of the fact that my tool is that I can grow 100 bushel an acre wheat. I'm real proud of my tool that I can use an aquaponic system to generate a food for an area. I'm real proud of this tool or that tool. Do we really care about the tool? What we really want is a solution that the tool provides. So I use the analogy of a drill and a hole. Do you really care about the drill, or do you care about the hole? And if you could use a different tool to make the hole and it was better, a laser, for example, and it was cheap, same price as a drill, what would you use? You'd use the tool that was worked better. You wouldn't get focused on the drill. So we need to do more of that. So that's what we do. We go into areas and we try to figure out what are the right tools for the solutions. Solution is to solve the hunger. And then we have a perspective that you can't give people fish. You can't expect that something's going to happen overnight, but rather it's going to happen over potentially a generation, maybe even longer. So you teach about how to learn, how to do things in a long term. So we have projects in 4 different continents where we've used that approach and have gone in and taken places where people were starving, have shown them how they can grow things and in an ecologically balanced manner in their local area, provide them with a way to make a living even from those, and then also use that food that they produce for solving their hunger situation. So we've got back to a more sustainable, regenerative approach, and it always involves sort of restoring. Usually you've got a degraded environmental status for wherever that location is. You've got a place that was historically a rainforest, and now it's been degraded into cultivated fields that are not appropriately functioning. So that's the approach that we endorse and that we use.
Nice. And so what are some of the countries that you're working in, Wayne?
Right now we're working in El Salvador, in Ecuador, in Swaziland, in the Ukraine, and in Mexico. And all those projects, and here's another piece of the model, all those projects were existing circumstances where three of the five were schools that had been started by another organization. 2 of the 5 were orphanages that were started by another organization. And they were solving issues related to education and related to the family, the home for abandoned children. They weren't solving hunger issues. That was still a real major issue that they had. All 5 also had water issues, and we didn't affect the water change. We worked with existing organizations that had water solutions. Charity Water, I think, in 4 of the 5 projects. And, I can't remember the name of the group that worked on the water on the 5th. And by the way, they're not old. The most mature of those projects is 5 years old. The least mature is 2 years. And again, we have local funding for those organizations. Local meaning it's U.S. or British-based organizations that are funding what goes on. Their local membership gets involved by doing trips to those places and providing support that way. And that's the way it was historically done. What we've added is that we have somebody that's there training all the time, as long as we believe and the local communities believe that training is still needed. And we trained someone from that local community before we started with whatever the solution was. And the solutions are all different in every one of those 5 situations. It's an aquaponics solution down in Mexico, at a camp and a school situation. It's a greenhouse with hydroponics, as well as a farm, market farm solution in Swaziland. In Ecuador, it's a completely organic, natural, regenerative farm situation with livestock and rotational grazing. And in Ecuador and which one did I mean? Ukraine, it's also a market farm kind of a situation along.
Nice. I really love the model of using an existing initiative and to kind of build the capacity of that initiative. And I mean, I think that's really a good approach. And I mean, Adam, from the conferences at Bio for Climate, you guys have been holding conferences for years now. And what kind of inspiring solutions have you seen along these lines?
Only 2, actually.
Okay.
But we've had 6 of them.
It feels like forever. I don't know. I've heard so much about them.
I know. It feels that way. It feels to me. I look back at what we did over a year, and I said, "Who did this? How did that happen?" But yeah, I'm sorry. Finish your question, Alex.
Oh, I just meant in terms of kind of Wayne's talking about these tangible solutions and training people in local communities with this knowledge that they have and kind of empowering them. What kind of solutions have you seen along those lines at Bio for Climate that we could learn from and kind of replicate as well?
Oh, they're all in Judy's books.
Okay.
And if, we started with holistic plant grazing. That was our original birthplace. But at this point, we're very eclectic. Anything that works, wetland restoration and biochar and managing of water cycles. And I mean, it's all connected. And you do, as Wayne indicates, you do what's appropriate to the habitat and the culture wherever you are. And we're not on the ground. We don't do those things. We educate about them. And we open up the climate conversation so that people who walk into the conference all gloomy and doomy, and this is also happening with the non-environmental organizations that we're starting to work with. They just think that emissions reductions are it, and if that doesn't work, we might as well go home, and some of them are going home. And all of a sudden, there's this whole universe of options of things they can do. What can I do? Well, we have a deep paving project. It's not our organization, but people have been doing deep paving in Somerville, and they tear up the unnecessary asphalt in their backyards. And in Massachusetts, it's really rainy, even though we're kind of in a drought right now. And a year later, you've got all this stuff blooming. You don't even have to plant it. And all of that is carbon that used to be in the atmosphere. So people want to do what they can do, want to know what they can do. Well, just turn your lawn into a native paradise, a native species paradise. Or do it the way Eric Tonesmeyer and Jonathan Bates have done it in their, what was 10 years ago, completely degraded property that they bought in Holyoke and turned it into a food forest. There are so many things that people can do. It's a question of knowing about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did an undergraduate in environmental studies and geography, and so from the environmental studies perspective, I was learning about all of the detrimental impact that humans are having on the planet, and a lot of my classmates were just really depressed and thinking, oh, there's no hope, the world's going to end, and it's kind of this like mindset that you're in, and it limits limits the possibilities in your mind in terms of what we can actually do. And then I went to Tom Newmark's farm, Finca Luna Nueva, and I learned about regenerative agriculture, and it opened up this whole world of solutions. And, we don't need to be stuck in this mindset of we're powerless, we can't do anything. No, actually everyone can do something. We all have the power to do something, and we can reverse desertification and restore soil carbon and biodiversity. We're seeing it.
And it happens really fast.
Exactly. It's amazing. You know, you're not taught this kind of stuff. I wasn't taught this in school. So it really opened up my mind, just doing something different, working on a farm, learning about food.
By the way, Wayne, the cooling that you're talking about with sulfur dioxide, we can do that just by bringing water back. I mean, water is the great planetary thermostat. And we can, I mean, this was what our conference was last fall, is restoring water cycles to reverse global warming. And we had Regenerative Singh, the waterman of India, from Rajasthan, where he restored several rivers in the driest province in India. And Michael Kravchuk, of course, from Slovakia, who has been doing all kinds of beaver-like things where there are no beavers. And it cools stuff down. I did this experiment in front of my house, my former house, and it was a 90-degree day, and there was my porch and some bushes and the lawn and then the cars where they park and the asphalt. And I took the temperature at each spot along the way. And on the asphalt, which is kind of a sort of a black body, it was 128 degrees. And under the bushes, it was 68 degrees. And that's within 200 feet, you have a temperature range, an outdoor temperature range of 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And all of that has to do with cover and water. And when you cover soil, as we know, it could be 100 degrees out, but it'll go down an inch and it'll be, you know, in the 60s or 70s where things can stay alive. So I think we can actually do something a lot more dramatic than the half a degree centigrade, if we provide that kind of cover. And I grant you that that's a daunting challenge. And it's not something that you just put up into the sky. So it's more problematic in some respects. But on the other hand, the benefits of restored ecosystems, I don't have to go into that. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Adam. And we can affect change very, very quickly. And you know, my ranch, I came into an area 10 years ago where it was a overgrazed cattle pasture over about a 300-acre area, and no water. And yet evidence was that there was a stream that wasn't just too far underground. And so really in less than 3 years, I had that stream running. I had really, the simple thing I did was just change the grazing pattern. But bottom line is that now there are 11 ponds in that area. There's a total surface coverage of about 4 acres, which isn't huge, but the temperatures there on a daily basis are 10 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than an area 100 yards downstream, literally 100 yards. And you can walk from what kind of year because of the water covers that we put, that's a constant. So you're absolutely right. Here's, I think, the human condition. We won't do things as a human species. We don't do things until we're forced to. And I think I gave this example with soybeans in the last time we talked, that here in the United States, when we didn't have fuel oil because of embargoes that occurred over in Asia right before World War II, we came up with a solution. And we came up with a technical solution, and we came up with the agricultural solution. More important, the victory gardens. I don't think I talked about this one, but you know, look at that statistic. There were 3% of Americans that had any kind of a food garden at all prior to the victory garden approach from President Roosevelt in World War II, up to, at its peak, 43% of Americans did by 1944. After World War II, it was back down to 3%. So it went from 3% to 43% to 3%. Because we didn't have that dramatic.
You know about the Victory Gardens initiative in Milwaukee?
I don't know the specifics. I know what Will Allen's done, and there's people in Milwaukee. Tell me specifics.
This isn't Will Allen.
No, I said I knew Will Allen in Milwaukee. Yeah.
Right. This is a group they have their blitz every May where they put in hundreds of victory gardens for people all over the city and in the suburbs. And they provide the materials and the expertise. And in the Boston area, the urban gardening is just mushrooming. So maybe we're coming back to that a bit, hopefully.
Well, Havana, Cuba was another example. You know, Havana, Cuba was faced with the embargo from and I was in Havana and saw 10 years ago, saw every square inch of rooftops and along street sides that were farmed. Well, now that embargo's over. I haven't been back yet, but I've heard from others that that's gone away. People aren't doing that anymore again. So now Havana's started importing a lot of its food again. So, I mean, it disturbs me that at times that the human condition, we have to be pushed to the brink, or we have to be pushed to a necessity. And
we have to be stressed.
Yet, you know,
I want to say, just, we're almost done, but I wanted to say one thing about people and our characteristics. I think it's really important that we don't blame ourselves for being human. We certainly have work to do because of our limitations, but the evil corporations, well, that's just people acting tribally. We should try to stop them, of course, but it's nobody's fault. It's part of our condition, and acknowledging that, I think, helps, because we don't have to go around beating ourselves up. We just have to get focused. And apropos of that, I want to make a commercial announcement that we are having a conference in November 18th through 20th at Harvard called Restoring Oceans to Reverse Global Warming. So this is going to be a whole other look at oceans, questioning common assumptions about how oceans behave or can behave or will behave. And I know there's all sorts of issues with thermal mass and that kind of thing, but we want to change the perspective a bit, acknowledging what's there. So were you an ocean scientist? You were at Scripps.
Yes, I was. I was a marine biologist and chemist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we should talk.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good spot to end. Wayne, I don't know if you had any final announcements either, any shout outs? Okay, well.
No, just real quickly, the reason I'm here is that I'm doing something about a year from now it's my little thing of what to do for global changes. I'm going to do a hike of the Continental Divide Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada. It's kind of a personal interest, but it's mainly because I'm going to be promoting what we do, the kind of projects that you just talked about that we do at the Institute of Ecolonomics, and using that platform as a little bit of notoriety of doing that. So
great. So you do
ways
podcasts.
off, but what's that?
You'll do podcasts and blog posts, stuff like that.
Yes.
A world restoration pilgrimage.
Yes.
I like it.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining today. We really love hearing everybody's thoughts, and thanks to all our listeners. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. More soon.
You bet. Bye-bye.